When the alien queen's royal guards ran, only one thing stood between her and death: a bleeding human soldier who refused to move. Loyalty is a luxury easily afforded in times of peace. That was what old soldiers said after the firing stopped, after the blood dried, after men who had survived too much tried to explain why others had not. Queen Beatrice understood the sentence as poetry. That was what old soldiers said after the firing stopped, after the blood dried, after men who had survived too much tried to explain why others had not. Queen Beatrice understood the sentence as poetry. Sergeant Cole Dempsey understood it as a warning. The Grand Hall of the Paladin Nations in Geneva smelled of polished marble, cold metal, and expensive air. Above the diplomatic floor, reinforced skylights caught the afternoon sun and broke it into clean white angles across the obsidian treaty table. Every camera on Earth was watching. Every military network in orbit was listening. 3 years after first contact, humanity was about to sign its first real agreement with the stars. Beatrice stood at the center of it like a figure carved out of moonlight. She was nearly 7 feet tall, pale skin faintly luminous beneath ceremonial robes threaded with living silver. Her face was elegant in a way that made human politicians look temporary beside her. She carried herself with the stillness of someone born above fear, above hunger, above the ugly mathematics of survival. Around her stood the royal aegis. 12 alien guards in seamless reactive armor, blue shields humming softly over their bodies. Their captain, Bradford, watched the hall with the calm arrogance of a creature who had never been forced to fight without protection. His gaze passed over the human security contractors with visible boredom. Dempsey caught it from 50 feet away. He did not react. He only shifted the weight of his 416 Hong Kong dollars against his chest and kept scanning the room. "Look at them," Corporal Miller whispered over the encrypted channel. "Bradford's guys act like we're local wildlife." "Stow it," Dempsey murmured. "They're paying us to look useful, not offended. Keep your eyes on Sector 4. Outside the compound, protesters had packed the streets for weeks. Anti-alien signs. Human first chance. Angry faces pressed against barricades. That noise did not bother Dempsey. Noise was honest. Crowds told you where their anger was. Silence was worse. He watched for hands too close to jackets, eyes that did not blink, bodies that moved against the rhythm of the room. The royal aegis watched the ceiling, the cameras, the ceremonial pathways. Dempsey watched the places where death preferred to enter. The UN Secretary-General stepped forward with the strained smile of a man trying to look historic instead of terrified. With this signature, he announced, "Our people step into a shared future." Beatrice gave a measured nod. "For peace," she said, "and the mutual prosperity of our worlds." She lowered the stylus. The ink never touched the parchment. The skylights detonated. Not cracked. Not shattered. Detonated. A blue-white pulse burst across the roofline, followed by a hypersonic wave that turned reinforced glass into glittering dust. The lights died. Holographic displays vanished. Screams tore through the hall as microscopic shards cut skin, robes, and uniforms. Then the royal aegis shields collapsed. One moment Bradford and his guards stood wrapped in blue energy. The next, sparks crawled over their armor and died. Dempsey was already moving. "Contact," he roared, dropping to one knee as black-armored figures descended through the ruined ceiling on fast ropes. They were not protesters. They moved too cleanly. Too quietly. Mat armor. Thermal plasma carbines. Controlled spacing. Professional killers. The first mercenary's boots touched marble. Dempsey fired twice. The man dropped before he unclipped from the rope. Dempsey shifted, fired twice more, and another body hit the floor hard enough to smear blood across the treaty seal. The grand hall became smoke, panic, and burning stone. Plasma bolts chewed through pillars. Delegates fell screaming. Human security teams dragged civilians toward side exits while alien dignitaries froze beneath a sky that had become hostile. "Protect the Queen," Bradford shouted. His voice cracked. Dempsey heard it. So did Beatrice. For the first time since she had stepped onto Earth, the Queen looked at her captain and saw not certainty, but calculation. Bradford stared at the dead shields on his armor, then at the advancing mercenaries cutting through the room with surgical violence. Defensive formation, Beatatrice commanded. Bradford did not move toward her. He moved back. The sovereign is compromised, he screamed. Fall back to the atmospheric shuttles. Evacuate. Beatrice's face changed before the first guard turned away. Not fear. Disbelief. One by one, the greatest warriors of the Alian ascendancy activated their boot thrusters and launched toward the broken roof. They fled through smoke and screams, blue armor rising into the Geneva sky while their queen remained alone on the blood-slick marble. General Richter stepped from the haze, plasma pistol in hand, scarred face split by a predator's grin. Well, he said, looking at the abandoned monarch, even gods run when they bleed. 3 mercenaries raised their weapons. Beatrice closed her eyes. Then Dempsey stepped between her and the guns. The first shot that should have killed Queen Beatrice hit the marble inches from Dempsey's boot. Stone vaporized in a white flash. Dempsey did not flinch. He planted himself over the fallen monarch, rifle locked into his shoulder, and cut down the nearest mercenary with 2 rounds through the throat seam of his armor. A second attacker tried to angle around the treaty table. Dempsey tracked him through the smoke and fired once through the visor. The man folded without a sound. Beatrice opened her eyes. The creature standing above her was not elegant. He was not armored in glowing light. He was smaller than her guards, wrapped in dark tactical fabric and blood. A line of shrapnel had opened his forehead, and red streamed down the side of his face into his collar. Yet he had not moved away from her. He had moved closer. You, Beatrice whispered, staring up at him. Why did you not run? Dempsey fired a short burst downrange, forcing Richter's men behind a collapsed pillar. In my unit, he said, eyes still forward, we don't leave people behind. Another plasma bolt screamed past his shoulder. The heat scorched the edge of his vest and filled the air with the stink of burned nylon. Can you walk? Beatrice tried to rise. Pain buckled her leg instantly. Blue blood darkened the silver weave of her robe. The blast damaged my leg. Plan B. Dempsey slung the rifle across his chest, grabbed her arm, and pulled. She was tall, but lighter than expected, her alien bones built for grace instead of impact. He dragged her upright and forced her weight over his shoulder. Stay low. Move when I move. Don't argue. They will kill us, she breathed. They can get in line. He drew his Glock with his free hand and shoved her toward the side corridor. Behind them, the Grand Hall was collapsing into chaos. Human contractors and UN security personnel fought in broken pockets, buying civilians seconds with their lives. The royal aegis was gone. Their boot trails still burned faintly in the smoky air above the ruined skylights. Beatrice looked back once. For a moment, through the smoke, she saw her treaty table split in half, her guards absent, and Bradford's blue armor vanishing into the sky. Then Dempsey pulled her through the emergency door. The corridor beyond was narrow concrete, built beneath Geneva decades before humans knew they had neighbors among the stars. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Emergency sirens howled through the walls. Every step sent a lance of pain through Beatrice's injured leg, but Dempsey did not slow. He could hear pursuit already. Not panic. Boots. Measured. Closing. Security Subbase 4, he muttered, reading the faded signs. Old comms hub. Reinforced door. This path ends there, Beatrice said, struggling for breath. Good. Good. Means they can only come from one direction. She stared at him, unable to understand how a dead end had become an advantage inside his mind. Dempsey kicked open a steel door marked Security Subbase 4 and pushed her inside. The room smelled of dust, hot wiring, and old machinery. A dead communications console lined one wall. Metal server racks stood in rows like black ribs. There was one door, one narrow ventilation shaft, and no exit large enough for the queen. He slammed the door shut and threw the manual bolts. Beatrice collapsed against the wall, clutching her bleeding leg. We are trapped, she said. Dempsey dropped his pack onto a desk. No, he said. We're making them pay rent. He ripped open a medical kit and knelt beside her. What are you doing? She gasped, pulling back. stopping the bleed. Hold still. I am not built like you. A hole is a hole. He packed combat gauze into the wound. Beatrice screamed. Dempsey did not apologize until the pressure dressing was tight around her thigh. Sorry, Your Highness. Pain means you're still here. She stared at the crude bandage, then at his bleeding face. Your species endures this often? Dempsey stood, listening to the footsteps gathering beyond the door. More than we should. He pulled 2 claymore mines from his pack and positioned them facing the entrance in a lethal cross pattern. Then he dragged the firing wires behind a server rack and checked the remaining magazines on his vest. 2 rifle mags. 1 pistol. 1 knife. 1 queen behind him. On the other side of the door, metal clamped against metal. Breaching charges. Beatrice watched him settle behind cover, wounded but steady, his rifle trained on the entrance as if the outcome had already been decided somewhere inside him. My own guards calculated survival as impossible, she said quietly. Why do you stay? Dempsey looked back at her once. Because I gave my word. The first charge clicked. His finger tightened on the clack. And because impossible is usually just where cowards stop counting. The steel door blew inward with a sound like the building itself had been punched. Smoke rolled across the floor. For half a second, the mercenaries saw nothing but darkness, broken server racks, and the wounded queen crouched behind a desk. Then Dempsey squeezed the clack. The claymores detonated together. The room became thunder. Thousands of steel bearings tore through the doorway in a flat, murderous storm. The first wave of mercenaries vanished into shredded armor and wet impact. Bodies slammed backward into the corridor. Tactical lights spun across the ceiling. Someone outside screamed for a medic, then stopped screaming when a second body fell across him. Beatrice pressed both hands over her ears. She had seen palace executions. She had watched fleet weapons melt pirate moons into glass from the safety of a command deck. But she had never seen violence this close, this crude, this intimate. Human weapons did not glow with elegance. They roared. They left no illusion about what they were made to do. Push through. Richter shouted from the hallway. Kill the contractor. A second wave stepped over the dead. Dempsey rose behind the server rack and fired in controlled bursts. 3 rounds. 3 rounds. Shift again. He did not shoot where armor was strongest. He shot where bodies had to bend. Under the arm. Neck seam. Knee joint. Visor edge. Every bullet had a job. Every second cost blood. Plasma bolts hammered the room. Concrete burst beside his head. A server rack melted into slag, spilling sparks across his boots. Dempsey leaned through the heat and kept firing until 1 bolt caught his left shoulder. The impact spun him halfway around. Burned flesh filled the air. Beatrice saw his jaw lock so hard the muscles in his neck stood out like cables. His left arm dropped uselessly at his side, but his right hand dragged the rifle back into line. He did not scream. That disturbed her more than if he had. In the ascendancy, pain was treated as a failure of planning. Shields prevented it. Medicine erased it. Royal bodies were preserved, optimized, protected from unnecessary suffering. This human accepted pain as information. He adjusted around it. Grenade, someone yelled. A small black sphere bounced through the ruined doorway and rolled toward the desk. Toward Beatrice. Dempsey saw it. There was no calculation on his face. No hesitation. No statistical pause. He left cover completely, crossed open ground under plasma fire, and kicked the grenade back into the hall. It detonated outside the room. The blast threw him against the wall. For one frozen moment, Beatrice thought he had survived it. Then a plasma bolt struck his vest. Dempsey hit the concrete hard enough to crack something inside him. His rifle skidded out of reach. His breath left him in a broken gasp. Blood sprayed across his teeth as he rolled onto his side, trying to pull air through ribs that no longer wanted to move. The firing stopped. Boots crunched over debris. General Richter entered through the smoke, stepping over his own dead men without looking down. His black armor was scratched, his face burned at one cheek, but his pistol remained steady. He looked at Dempsey. Then at the Queen. Impressive, Richter said. You made us bleed for it. Dempsey's right hand twitched toward his holster. Richter noticed and aimed his pistol at Beatatrice instead. Don't, he said softly. Or I paint the wall with royalty. Dempsey froze. Beatatrice felt the barrel settle on her like a physical weight. Richter smiled. That is the problem with loyal men, Sergeant. They are easy to control. Put someone helpless in front of them, and they build their own cage. Dempsey breathed once. What? Shallow. But his eyes did not leave Richter's boots. Not his weapon. Not his face. His boots. Beatatrice saw it then. The human was not finished fighting. He was measuring the floor. Richter took one step closer to the desk, savoring the silence. Then another. Dempsey's bloodied mouth moved. 2 steps, he whispered. Richter stopped. What was that, Sergeant? Dempsey's lips were slick with blood. His chest moved in short, failing pulls. Beatatrice could hear fluid in each breath, a soft internal drowning that made every second feel stolen. Dempsey blinked slowly. I said, he rasped, you should have checked your corners. His right hand snapped to the Glock. Richter shifted his pistol toward him, but Dempsey did not aim at Richter's armor. He fired past him, into the shadows behind the general. The rounds struck the emergency fire suppression cylinder bolted near the wall. For one absurd instant, nothing happened. Then the valve ruptured. A violent white cloud exploded through the room with a shriek of compressed gas. Freezing halon blasted across Richter's exposed face and flooded the thermal sensors in his helmet. He screamed, stumbling blind, his pistol firing wildly into the ceiling. Dempsey moved. He had no strength left for elegance. No breath left for strategy that looked like strategy. He launched himself from the floor with his good arm and one working leg, driving his shoulder into Richter's knees. Both men crashed down. The plasma pistol spun away across the concrete. Beatatrice stared from behind the desk, unable to move. This was no longer a battle between technology and technology. It was meat, bone, blood, will, and the terrible refusal of one damaged organism to accept the result everyone else had already calculated. Richter was bigger. Richter was armored. Richter was not half dead. He drove an armored fist into Dempsey's burned shoulder. Dempsey's body convulsed. A sound tore from his throat, low and animal, but his hand still went to the knife on his chest rig. Richter grabbed his wrist before the blade could descend. You are dead, Richter spat, forcing the knife away inch by inch. You know that, don't you? You are already dead. Dempsey's eyes locked onto his. Maybe. Richter pushed harder. The knife trembled above the concrete. Dempsey's arm shook so violently Beatatrice thought the bones would break before the blade moved another inch. Blood ran from his mouth onto Richter's armor, bright red against black plating. But you're coming with me. Dempsey stopped resisting. For a fraction of a second, Richter's strength carried the knife arm outward exactly where Dempsey wanted it. Then Dempsey twisted with the motion, letting the blood-slick floor turn his weight. His knee slammed upward. His forehead crashed into Richter's nose. Cartilage cracked. Richter's grip loosened. Not much. Enough. Dempsey drove the blade down into the soft gap beneath Richter's tactical collar. The general's body locked. His eyes widened, not with fear at first, but with insult, as if the universe had violated its own hierarchy. His mouth opened. Only a wet, choking sound came out. Dempsey held the knife there. He did not have the strength to stab twice. He only pressed down with everything left in him, forehead resting against Richter's broken face, until the mercenary's hands stopped clawing at his vest. The room went quiet except for the hiss of gas. Dempsey rolled off the corpse and hit the floor. Beatatrice crawled toward him. Her injured leg screamed beneath her, but she barely felt it. Her hands slipped in dust, halon frost, blue blood, and red. She reached him and pressed one trembling hand against his face. Sergeant Dempsey. His eyes fluttered. Did we get him? She looked at Richter's body, at the knife still buried in his throat, at the destroyed doorway filled with dead men who had come to kill her. You killed him, she whispered. The assassin is dead. Dempsey's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Good. His eyelids lowered. Contract fulfilled. No. The word left Beatatrice before she knew she had spoken it. Dempsey's eyes barely opened. She leaned closer, her voice no longer regal, no longer distant, no longer protected by centuries of throne room discipline. I do not release you from your contract, she said. Do you hear me, Sergeant? You are not permitted to die. The first human rescue team reached the bunker 7 minutes later. To Beatatrice, it felt like 7 years. Flashlights cut through the lingering Halon fog. Boots entered cautiously through the ruined doorway, stepping over bodies, weapons, melted concrete, and torn armor. A voice shouted for clear lines. Another called for medics. Then Corporal Miller appeared through the smoke, his face blackened with soot, his armor scorched across one side. He saw Dempsey on the floor. Jesus Christ, Cole. Miller dropped beside him and ripped open a trauma kit with shaking hands. Medic. I need a medic right now. Sucking chest wound, plasma burns, possible spinal trauma. Dempsey did not answer. The oxygen in the room seemed to vanish with him. Beatatrice stayed beside the fallen human until 2 medics pulled her back. She resisted at first, not with strength, but with command, the old royal instinct rising even through shock. Then she saw their hands move with brutal speed and terrible competence. Needles. Gauze. Chest seals. Pressure. Orders clipped so short they sounded like weapons. They were not graceful. They were effective. One medic cut through Dempsey's vest. Another pressed gloved fingers against his throat. A third forced an oxygen mask over his bloodied mouth. He still has a pulse. The words struck Beatatrice harder than the explosion had. Still, not safe. Not saved. Still, they loaded him onto a tactical stretcher and moved. Beatatrice followed. Every soldier told her to go to the secure extraction point. Every official tried to place a protective ring around her. She ignored them all and limped beside the stretcher, one hand locked around its metal rail, her own blue blood trailing behind her in scattered drops across the corridor floor. They emerged into the shattered grand hall. The treaty chamber no longer looked like the birthplace of a new age. It looked like an autopsy. Broken glass glittered in blood. The obsidian table was split. Human security bodies lay covered beneath emergency blankets. Mercenaries were zip-tied or dead. Above, through the destroyed skylights, sirens wailed across Geneva. Then the sky darkened. A massive alien command ship descended through the clouds, flanked by silver fighters, its hull smooth and perfect and 1 hour too late. Beatatrice looked up at it. No relief crossed her face. Only judgment. 3 hours later, inside a fortified UN command tent near Geneva International Airport, the Queen sat in a reinforced chair while alien surgeons sealed the wound in her leg with shimmering dermal light. Her new robe was clean. Her posture was flawless. Her face was calm. That calm frightened everyone in the room. The tent flap opened. The UN Secretary-General entered first, pale and hollow-eyed. Behind him came Captain Bradford, escorted by human military police. Bradford's armor shone again. Its blue energy shield hummed as if it had never failed. He stepped forward and dropped to one knee, head bowed with perfect ceremonial sorrow. "My sovereign," he said, "we praise the stars that you survived. When the EMP disabled our shields, tactical protocol dictated withdrawal to secure the airspace and call the fleet. We believed you had perished in the initial blast. The grief we felt." Silence. The word was soft. Bradford stopped as if struck. Beatatrice rose. "You speak of protocol," she said. "You speak of airspace. You speak of everything except the one duty you were bred and sworn to perform." Bradford's eyes lifted. "To stand between me and death." The tent went still. The human weapons were unexpectedly. The humans? Beatatrice stepped toward him, her voice sharpening. "You blame the humans? You wore the most advanced armor in the quadrant and fled because your shield flickered. A fragile human with no shield, no title, and no oath to my bloodline dragged me through fire while you ran into the sky." Bradford's expression cracked. "Your Majesty, I was informed a local contractor assisted." "A human saved your queen," Beatatrice said. "And he did it after your courage failed." Bradford remained on one knee, but the shape of submission had become a prison around him. For the first time, Queen Beatrice saw the tremor beneath his polished discipline. Not fear of death. Not grief. Fear of exposure. "You were ordered to leave me," she said. The tent seemed to shrink around the words. Bradford's mouth opened, then closed. The UN Secretary-General looked between them, suddenly understanding that the battle beneath Geneva had not ended with Richter's body. "My sovereign," Bradford said carefully, "there are command structures above the royal aegis that even I must obey in moments of diplomatic crisis." Beatrice stared at him. That was all the confession she needed. "Lord Caldor," she said. Bradford's face lost color in a way even alien skin could not hide. The Secretary-General stiffened. Beatrice turned toward him. "My uncle, the Minister of Defense, armed the assassins. He provided plasma carbines, shield disruption intelligence, and the withdrawal order that left me alone on that floor." Bradford lowered his head. He did not deny it. That silence was uglier than any answer. Beatrice looked back at the captain who had once stood beside her throne, who had worn honor like a decoration, who had spoken for years about the sacred duty of the royal aegis. In the grand hall, under broken glass and smoke, all that sacred language had weighed less than one human contractor's promise. "You knew," she said. Bradford swallowed. "I knew the minister believed your Earth policy endangered the ascendancy. You knew." His hands tightened against his armored thighs. "I was told withdrawal would preserve the continuity of command." Beatrice stepped close enough that the blue glow of his shield reflected in her eyes. "No. You were told to survive your treason." Bradford looked up then, desperate. "Majesty, the human alliance will weaken us. Caldor believes Earth will pull us into primitive conflicts, emotional warfare, unstable politics. He believes your mercy is making the throne vulnerable." Beatrice's expression did not change. "My mercy survived an assassination attempt," she said. "Your strength fled from one." No one moved. Then Beatrice reached down and tore the gilded insignia from Bradford's chest plate. The sound was small. The meaning was not. "You are stripped of rank, title, and honor," she said. "You will be confined aboard the command ship and tried for high treason. If Lord Caldor believes distance protects him, inform him that distance is only time I have not yet crossed." Two loyal alien soldiers entered and seized Bradford by the arms. He resisted once, instinctively, then saw the Queen's face and stopped. They dragged him from the tent. Only after the flap closed did Beatrice allow herself to breathe. The Secretary-General spoke first. "Your Majesty, this will destabilize your government." "My government was already rotting," she said. "Today only open the wall." She turned toward him. "Where is Sergeant Dempsey?" The Secretary-General checked his tablet. "University Hospital of Geneva. Intensive care. He underwent emergency surgery. Collapsed lung, severe plasma burns, fractured ribs, rebuilt collarbone. But he's stabilized." Beatrice's eyes sharpened. "He is alive?" "Yes. Barely. He woke 10 minutes ago." The Queen looked toward the tent opening, where human soldiers moved through floodlights and rain, still carrying stretchers from the compound. Her own empire had sent her killers. Earth had sent medics. "Take me to him," she said. The Secretary-General hesitated. "You should rest." Beatrice walked past him. "I rested while better people bled." The ICU room was too clean for what had brought them there. No smoke. No marble dust. No screaming metal. Only the steady beep of a heart monitor and the soft mechanical breath of machines keeping rhythm for a man too stubborn to stop. Cole Dempsey lay beneath white hospital light, bandaged across the chest and shoulder, one side of his face bruised dark, lips cracked, skin pale beneath old blood the surgeons had not fully washed away. Tubes ran into his arm. A clear mask rested near his mouth. Queen Beatrice entered alone. No guards. No advisors. No crown. For a moment, she stood at the foot of the bed and looked at the human who had done what an empire's finest warriors had not. Without armor. Without certainty. Without any promise that survival was possible. Dempsey's eyes opened slowly. It took him several seconds to focus. When he saw her, one corner of his mouth lifted. "Your Highness," he rasped. "You look less blown up than I remember." A sound escaped Beatatrice before she could stop it. Not quite a laugh. Not quite grief. "And you, Sergeant Dempsey," she said, sitting beside him, "look exactly as stubborn as I remember." She placed her hand gently over his uninjured one. His fingers were warm, rough, and weak. She had expected the hand of a warrior to feel powerful. Instead, it felt breakable, and that made what he had done harder to understand. "I came to thank you," she said. "You returned my life to me. You exposed the rot inside my throne. The ascendancy owes you a debt it cannot measure." Dempsey breathed through the pain and closed his eyes. "Just doing the job, ma'am." "No," Beatrice said softly. "That is the lie your species uses when courage becomes too heavy to name." He opened his eyes again. Outside the room, distant footsteps moved through the hospital corridor. Human doctors. Human soldiers. People still cleaning blood from the day. "The royal aegis is being dissolved," Beatrice said. "Bradford is under arrest. Lord Caldor will stand trial if he is wise enough to surrender before I reach him." Dempsey blinked once. "Busy afternoon." "It became clearer than any council session ever made it," she continued. "A shield is not a field of energy. A shield is the thing that chooses to remain when every calculation says to leave." Dempsey stared at her, silent now. "I am establishing a new royal aegis," she said. "A joint vanguard between Earth and the ascendancy. I want humans in it. I want your unit in it. And when you are healed, I want you to command it." For the first time, Dempsey looked genuinely caught off guard. "I'm a contractor. You were the only oath in that hall that held." He looked down at the bandages across his chest. The monitor ticked through the silence. Beatrice saw the answer forming before he spoke, not from ambition, not from pride, but from memory. The ruined doorway. The queen behind the desk. The line he had drawn because no one else would. "One condition," he said. "Name it. We do it my way. No ceremonial armor pretending to be courage. No shield worship. They learn cover, angles, blood loss, evacuation routes, dirty tricks, and how to keep moving after fear arrives. If they guard you, they train until leaving you behind feels worse than dying." Beatrice looked at him for a long time. In her empire, loyalty had always been decorated. It wore gold. It marched in formation. It kneeled before thrones and repeated ancient vows in perfect voices. Here, it lay half-broken under hospital lights, asking only for better training before it returned to work. Beatrice bowed her head. "Commander Dempsey," she said, "I would expect nothing less." He gave the smallest nod, then exhaustion pulled at his eyes. Beatrice did not rise immediately. She watched the fragile rhythm of his breathing and finally understood why Richter had stopped smiling in the bunker. He had not been beaten by strength. He had been beaten by a promise that kept fighting after the body had become wreckage. The galaxy had built shields to prevent sacrifice. Humans had built promises that survived it. Beatrice stood, placed 2 fingers against the rail of his bed in silent salute, and left the room without summoning her guards. Behind her, the monitor kept beeping. One small human heartbeat, holding the line.